Thanks for your patience. Hi again. I would like us to begin this panel discussion. As you know, today's topic is the role of women in community-based conservation. So in today's panel discussion, we are hoping to cover, in addition to the role of women at various levels in community-based conservation, we are also hoping to cover some important subjects like the opportunities and challenges that women face in this profession of conservation and conservation research. And also, have some discussions or begin discussions on how we could make this profession, the conservation profession and conservation research professions, more gender equitable and more supportive of women. I'd like to thank Justine, Ranjini, and others at the Snow Leopard Network for organizing this discussion. And I think it's really important, as we all think it's a really important discussion, particularly because whether or not we like to admit it, we all live in highly male-biased societies and function in highly male-biased systems. And, just being gender neutral in our efforts is not enough. And we need to be doing much more to, make not just the conservation, the effectiveness of conservation, but also the engagement in conservation as a profession more equitable and more supportive of women. So today's in today's panel discussion, I'm very fortunate to be joined by three diverse and fascinating panelists. We have Dr. Lu Zhe joining us from Beijing. We have Baira Aguantirin joining us from Ulaanbaatar, and we have Rashmi Singh from India. And I'd just like to say that it's been an incredible privilege and honor for me to have worked with at least two of these people, Lu Zhe and Baira, and they have been amongst the most inspiring and fearless conservationists that I have met anywhere. And so I'm really particularly pleased to have both of them. I've not had the opportunity to work with Rashmi, but very glad that Rashmi is able to join us as well. So what I would like to do now is to request each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and then we can start with the actual panel discussion. So maybe we can start with you, Rashmi. If you could say a few words of introduction and the kind of work you've been doing.
Yeah, thank you, Charaji, and thank you for inviting me to this very important discussion today. My name is Rashmi Singh, and I'm a PhD scholar at the School of Human Ecology, Ambedkar University, Delhi. I've been working in the pastoral communities of Indian Himalaya for past 8 years. And with my work, I do two things. One, I showcase the wide knowledge of pastoralists and how their resource use has a rationale of a variety of things, including the seasonality, including their own knowledge about the system. And two, with my PhD research in Sikkim Himalayas, I'm looking at what are the long-term implications of the false assumptions of pastoralist and rangeland conservation not being compatible with each other. So these are the two ways that I help in bringing in pastoral voices into the mainstream conservations of rangelands of Indian Himalaya. And yeah, I'm looking forward to more discussion.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Rashmi. And I think your work's also very valuable because one of the things that we would like to cover in today's discussions is the impact of conservation efforts and conservation policies on women, particularly in the pastoral and local communities. So that'd be really interesting to listen to your thoughts. Perhaps Baira could go next. Baira, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be at the same platform with you all today. My name is Baira Aguantirin. I serve as Executive Director of Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation in Mongolia. My career as conservationist started late 1990s, and mostly I started working with developing grassroots level community-based conservation programs, and I'm fortunate to see that how these programs actually evolves into something and how these programs empower local people. So I would be happy to share some of the experiences today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paira. Lucia?
Hi, thank you, Charu, and thank you, Justin, everyone. It's nice to see some of old friends' name on the internet, and welcome to all to join in this discussion. I hope you're not only women in the audience. Oh, my name is Li Zhi. I'm a professor at Peking University and also founder of Shanshui Conservation Center, which is an NGO in Chinese NGO. I started to work in conservation field I'm the oldest, I guess, in 1985. So I did research on the giant panda and various species, including snow leopard. Currently, I'm still working on the snow leopard. And so you can imagine that I've encountered many subjects and issues that involving conservation. I also worked in international organizations such as WWF and Conservation International. Today, my main focus is on the community-based conservation and citizen sciences in urban areas, especially. But the working area spread all over China, from rural region to urban setting, and agriculture land today. I'm also involved in policy making as well, especially during the preparation of COP15. In today's in the context of today's subject, I should mention that I'm also a vice president of China Women's Association for Science and Technology. So I'm involved in producing or promoting women's role in science, in terms of building supportive policies and financial incentives as well. Thank you. I'd like to, so my discussion may go beyond snow leopard and the conservation field today, if you would like to.
Thank you, Lucia. And I've also had the great opportunity of being able to work with some of your PhD students, former PhD students who are, growing conservationists in their own right. And it's just an amazing team of people, particularly women scientists and conservationists that you have mentored in China and elsewhere. So glad you were able to join us today.
Thank you.
So moving forward, what we have planned is for each of our speakers to do a brief share their thoughts either through a presentation or even without a presentation. And after that, we will have a panel discussion. But if you, amongst our participants and audience, if you do have questions and comments, please keep typing them into the chat box. So first, I would like to invite Paira to share her thoughts and her presentation.
Okay, let me just share my screen here. I have a few slides to show. Yeah, as I just mentioned briefly in my introduction, I was fortunate to be able to get involved in a grassroots level of community-based conservations. And so today I would just like to share my experience, what the women's role and participation in conservation in the local level. So our organization, Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation Mongolia, has been running various community-based conservation programs to support local livelihoods to help harmoniously coexist with snow leopards. One of the programs called Snow Leopard Enterprises is the longest running one, which involves women more than 90% because of the handicraft production as income source. So I would briefly describe what we have learned, how the program contributes to rural women's development, as well as what have been their roles in conservation. Through the participation of SLE program, rural women grew more confident and self-reliant. As we noticed, it raised women's profile to household and community level. More women are elected as community leaders, and their level of decision-making power for themselves as well as conservation is being enhanced. More than 60% of the women valued their participation of SLE program as a chance of networking, skill improvement, more than the income generation, which is very interesting. So this shows that the program contributes to women's development in their social capital. Through the years, we see that the program evolves into creation of community organization that is responsible for managing snow leopard landscapes, where women plays very important role for management of the areas, as well as the conservation advocates. So I just wanted to share a small story of one of the rural herder women in Mongolia, Surunku, who has been a participant in our program since 2000. So she has been community leader and manages about 800 square kilometer territory of snow leopards in Tost Mountain. While we were working there in 2010, we learned that Tost Mountain is one of the viable habitats of snow leopard given away to mining licenses in Mongolia. So we realized that time that mining is actually imminent threat to snow leopards, not retaliatory killing. So as soon as we collaborated with local people and organized many years of campaign. So in order to make Tost Mountain to be protected areas for snow leopards, it took us 7 years. So however, this success of our organization wouldn't have been possible, for example, individuals like Surunku, because her support was very valuable to us. So while working with these local communities, we realized that they've learned more about lobbying, networking, and their knowledge of environmental laws and human rights were increased. So just after Tost was protected, local people noticed that the oasis in the area many lives and wildlife depend on was left without protection. So they immediately raised their voice that we need to protect this oasis. So this, with the leadership of Surunku, they started campaigning about protecting the oasis. So they didn't stop. And because it was not only snow leopard corridor area, it was also a very important area for gardening for local people for many years. So it was actually amazing to see that these local advocates were able to organize national level conferences, medias, and meeting with decision makers to raise how important their oasis and it needs to be protected. Her campaign required a number of trips to organize all those high-level conferences and media meetings and all these decision-making meetings. and into the capital city of UB. And she was able to organize her fellow herders to come to UB to participate all these important events. So, however, luckily in September 2019, the cabinet heard her voice, and the cabinet decided to extend Tost nature reserve boundary with 1,634 square kilometer land, which include the oasis. Yeah, and for this achievement, actually, Surunku was recognized in 2020 as a Conservation Hero Award by the David Shepherd Conservation Foundation. So I just briefly told you this story of the local women, but how they can be, important players for the conservation. So, though as conservationists, we know that, there are so many cultural, social, and economical barriers for women to be included in the conservation programs. It's very important for us to make sure that we engage women as much as we can. So that is basically I wanted to share with you guys about women's roles and in local level conservation programs.
Thanks very much, Baira, also sharing those inspiring stories. We'll come back to some of them. Maybe I can next request Rashmi to share her views and thoughts.
Yeah, thank you again, Charuji, Ranjini, and Justin for inviting me. For today's discussion on how to better engage women in conservation programs across the snow leopard range, I focus on the pastoral communities of Indian Himalaya, who are the prime human inhabitants of the snow leopard range in India. Himalayan rangelands, as many of you know, are home to a culturally rich pastoral communities, as well as diverse assemblage of plant and animal species. However, in the long-standing debate on the role of pastoralists in rangeland conservation, the culture of conservation and the politics of science continue to monopolize the policy discussion and results in a top-down conservation approach. It is only in the recent past that the idea of genuinely engaging the local communities in conservation initiatives have gained momentum. We have several examples of negative impacts of ill-informed conservation policies on pastoral lives. Some of these policies led to forced sedentarization, curtailment of pastoral mobilities, and curbing their traditional rights, which resulted in loss for both pastoralists and biodiversity. But what are these losses and how do they differ for men and women? As soon as we speak about the pastoralist, the image that comes to one's head is of a male pastoralist with a herd of animals. And these are the results of a Google search with the keyword pastoralists. And you can see these are all men with their livestock herds. So where are women? Even when women pastoralists contribute equally or sometimes more in men in making decisions on managing livestock on daily basis, their voices in community participation and decision making is mostly absent. This can be attributed to both the biased gaze of the researcher, which is driven by the popular figure of male pastoralists, as well as the historical marginalization of women by the local institutions. Women of pastoral households not only participate, but sometimes they're solely responsible for preparing animal feed, taking care of the young ones and sub-adult, making the bedding for the animals in an agropastoral setup, and milching animals. They also contribute to the household's economy by making livestock-derived products such as cheese, locally known as churpi, and ghee, and a whole lot of other woolen garments and rugs. In this picture, which I clicked in Spiti from Western Himalaya, Indian Western Himalayas, you can see this woman is making wool out of sheep hair, which is then transformed into beautiful rugs for the house. So this was about the role of women in pastoral communities. I also want to point out that the loss which is faced by the pastoral community due to conservation and development policies may mean very different for men and women members of the community. From my ongoing research, where I'm understanding the implications of grazing ban of Sikkim, situated in the eastern Indian Himalayas, men attributed loss to loss of income, animal wealth, and pastoral culture, a way of living. But it was fascinating to see what loss meant to women pastoralists. Here you see a picture of one of the herder family that I interviewed in Sikkim. And the women in this picture was nostalgic about the freedom and respect that was associated with the nomadic way of life when she used to live a herder's life. The sense of community that the women shared in extreme climatic conditions and the help they were ready to give each other, especially at the time of childbirth, were some of the losses that the women of these pastoral houses mentioned at the time of my study. They associated the increased chances of diseases like diabetes to their sedentary life and food habits post eviction from the park. So this eviction was done with the perceived imagination of overgrazing and grazing being bad for the rangeland conservation in the Kanchenjunga National Park that I study for my PhD. With these insights from my work in both Eastern and Western Himalaya, I conclude that conservation in the snow leopard range should be adaptive, inclusive, flexible, and integrated with a special focus on the issues of gender and class by both policymakers as well as the researchers who are trying to explore these geographies. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi. Those are really important findings that you have summarized for us in a very short period of time. Sorry about that, but really, really insightful. We'll come back to some of your findings. And now I'd request Lucia to share her views.
Thank you, Charu. I will give a few short stories to both to share experiences and raising questions. Well, as you all know, that the snow leopard community, the communities living around snow leopards are mostly traditional communities. And these communities are typically male-dominant societies. In the Tibetan region, the culture, the Buddhism culture, are especially agreeable to conservation because of the, and as well as many other religions. But in Tibetan region, the Buddhism teaching has been influencing the conservation behavior of people for many years, and we always enjoyed such a social asset to work with. So it was surprising in 2017, one of my students did a survey under the Darwin Initiative project on community awareness and the attitude towards snow leopards. And so it was surprising to find out that the results show women have a higher, stronger resistance to snow leopards because of the livestock killing. And for conservation, women seems to have lower awareness and the interests in participation. So with that result, we began to learn why would this become the situation. Coincidentally, there was another work we involved with Tibetans in Yunnan. The coworker told me that when we argued about, a male dominant society would women have a fair, equal opportunities and equal rights of speech and etc. etc. She actually gave a different perspective. She well, her interpretation was, she's a Tibetan from that community. Her interpretation was that the women have, although male appear to be dominant in the society, in the community, but women may have more to say, more power in the family. So it's basically a job sharing. Man is in charge of external affairs and women in charge of internal affairs. So when a man speaks outside, it may be the women's idea. But so for a long time, these different roles were rather equal until recently that when man dealing with our external business, receiving more information, more interaction, more relationships with outside, so allow them to become advanced in finding job opportunities outside and doing business with outside. So that has changed the community's perspective on what is important when business involved and the money is considered as an important subject in the family and in the community. In people's views on how you evaluate this person is more capable or less capable, it depends on how much money they can make. Then now women are in a worse situation because women staying at home making less money. Even themselves, they start to say, well, since the men are the ones making money, so we'd better to listen to them. So the power in the family also has been diluted, has been weakening. Well, whether this is true, I think it provided a very interesting perspective on the changing, the shifting of roles and values even when different subjects, new items were introduced in the society, in the community. Money has never been missed in any community, but the emphasis on money has never been so high in till now. Well, given that situation, while we in our work, we have done a few analysis on why women became less interested in conservation, because now conservation has also become a very widespread government policy and messaging. So when men go out more often and receive information more direct, so it looks as if the men have higher environmental awareness just from a simple survey by asking a few questions relating to behavior and whether you would like to participate in conservation or not. So that suggests that women, the work on women, as mentioned by Baya and Kiran, that more work should be done with women, because if they still, even their role in family may have been weakened, but their role still strong, still significant in the family at least. So in the new projects, we have worked with the community. One is the community co-op to produce products. It's very similar to what Bayan just mentioned, just began a couple years ago. And women leaders do show very strong initiative and capacity of making a change. So this kind of personality would become very, very important to even change the culture of the whole community in their view on women. On the other hand, another project brought tourists into the community for community guards to become guides to show them snow leopards. That's a project we call Valley of Big Cats. Quite successful, made a lot of money for the communities. In some families, girls are the ones being educated, speaking Chinese or even English. So they have advantages to receive guests from outside. Well, outsiders from usually women do not eat together with guests traditionally, but outsider tourists, when they come, they request that the female members of the family would eat together. So gradually that also changed some of the understanding and behavior in the community. Well, when girls taking guests out, they became more knowledgeable about environment, about this business. So when the village discussed about tourism program, girls would participate. Father would initially say they do not like girls to go openly speak and representing the family, which is true. But with persuasion from program of staff and our students who have made very good friends with those girls, some of these girls became very outspoken and active in the community. And later on, this young girl actually approached us and said, why do you always hire old men as guards? You should start from younger people and women as well. So we were criticized by this girl. So these things are happening and changing. And the question is, as an outsider, obviously traditionally it's a male-dominant society. It has a decision-making structure that only men involved. So when we start to talk about women's role in community, in conservation, it actually talks about women's role in community and in family. So as an outsider, as outsiders, are we respecting the culture? Are we changing the culture? Is it good or bad? So that's a question I would raise to you all. And in addition to what's happening in the local community, I would also say that the perspectives, the cultures are dynamic. It's true. And the perspectives from outside has been changing. China has gone through several periods of change toward women's role in the community. Well, as you know, China was a traditional community which male had an absolute dominant role in the past, before 49. But when Communist Party after Communist Party took power, women is half the sky was a slogan, was a value promoted in the society. But after 70s, late 70s and 80s, when the market economy was introduced, very similar to what the girl in Yunnan had mentioned, men became more active, and with more money, when men have more financial capacity, can raise the family, they sometimes require women to stay home to raise children as full-time mother and wife. So this change, if you would like to say it's a backward change or forward, I don't know. The change has also happening. A lot of women return home to become full-time mother and wife. So is this mean women certainly have a role in raising family and raising children, perhaps different, I wouldn't say more important, but different more intimate with children in the family. It requires a lot of time. But what does it mean? Is it the financial status? Does that always mean the status of different genders? What should be changed if we talk about the equity between genders? So these are the two questions I would like to raise for the discussion in the next session.
Thanks very much, Lucia. This is very thought-provoking as always. Thank you. I think what I found also very fascinating was that, on the one hand, all the examples that you've shared and anecdotes that you shared and the principles or the larger generalizations you tried to draw are really interesting. What I also find interesting is, like Rashmi was talking about the potentially negative role or impact that conservation efforts and policies can have disproportionately perhaps on women. You also shared examples of instances where conservation efforts in a way have had a positive impact on the role of women. But then there's this dilemma about, like you rightly raised, about whether and to what extent is it okay for conservationists to go and do these things, and whether they like it or not, create those changes in the society, and to what extent is it actually interfering with culture and social system. And I guess, like most dilemmas, it's hard to, and it goes into realms of ethics, and it's going to be always hard to find a easy answer, a black and white answer, but really important that we raise these questions and engage with them. So thank you for pushing us in that direction. And the other important thing that I also, I thought really important thing that you mentioned was, and talk about role of women in conservation. We really are also talking about the role of women in society and culture. And that's where, perhaps if we have to be focused on the understanding the potential role of women in conservation, particularly from the communities, the first step might be to actually do a better understanding of the role of their role in those societies. So between these three presentations, I think we've covered, Baira talked about the role that some of the women have actually been playing in protecting an important snow leopard habitat from really serious kind of threats. I mean, they were protecting, of course, their rangelands, but they were also protecting snow leopards in trying to protect their rangelands. So we've looked at a bit about the role that women can play in conservation, as well as through Rashmi's presentation, we've tried to see the role of the impact of conservation on women, and something that you also alluded to, Lucia. What I'd like to do is, as we move forward, one thing that we haven't touched upon yet in these presentations is the challenges and opportunities that you all have faced, or in general, your view about the challenges and opportunities that women face in this profession, conservation and conservation science. I think there's research out there and knowledge out there about about how gender bias creates challenges for women in the professional field. But it would be nice to try and understand or get a sense of your views as panelists in terms of the challenges that you may have faced, that you might, or the opportunities that you saw because you were women. I think it would be good to engage in that a little bit for us to get a better perspective, and particularly for the men to get a better perspective of the view from the women's side in this profession. So whoever would like to go first. Lucia, would you, you've had such a, what I'd also like to ask you in particular, Lucia, is, you've had, such a breadth of experience in this, and you've been at it for such a long time. And if there's any changes that you have noticed as well in this field, in terms of through your own experiences or through the experiences of others, in how supportive it has been for women, or what are the kind of challenges you have faced and how they have changed over time.
Well, in my experience, I was thinking about the questions may be different at community level and at the professional level. I started with the professional level. I think for young people to choose working on conservation, women actually have advantage. I mean, in a society like China, men are expected to make money, to raise family, to, make different kind of jobs. Although traditionally working in the field were not considered as women's job. I remember when I started, everyone around me would say, no, as a girl, first thing what they would say is, as a girl, more appropriate job is to work in the lab, etc., etc. So that was so natural. Everybody, speak of it. So much that you felt that just making the point that girls can work in the field is a rebalance. Rebellion. What's the word? It's against the society, almost like a choice that against the society, not subservient member of the society. However, I think the field work is as difficult for men as for children. Actually, I would not for girls. When I took the advantage, I took a lot of advantage of being a girl working in the field, because always or someone wants to carry my stuff, carry my gears and take food for me, etc. So I was taken care of because so few girls are in the field. My students now don't have that advantage today. So the society has been changing. I see that overall environment has been changing, that young people have more choices to make. When they make a personal choice, no longer so strong social opinions against them to persuade them. I guess parents are better educated and have different experiences in the community, etc. So now more girls are. If you talk about my students, I have more girl students than boy students, and actually I sometimes joke to my students. All my boy students are working on GIS, grassland, or vegetation, that kind of work. All my girl students are working on leopards, snow leopard, wolf, and all these fierce animals. So girls are fearless. No one, it's admired. Their behavior now is admired. So there's a changing behavior, social norm, I would say. Plus, I think boys are under stronger pressure to make more money, and conservation apparently is not the kind of career that makes a lot of money. So they tend not to, under pressure from the society and self-identification, I think they choose, hesitate to select conservation as a career to develop. That's from professional level, but for the community level, I think what I just mentioned, if you look at the pastoralist women's daytime, how they spend their time every day, you would understand they don't have any spare time to worry about other things. From 5 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock in the evening, at night, they've been busy on everything. Now, especially after the nomadic system basically collapsed, It's no longer moving so frequently, or moving with the car, motorcycles became much easier. Man's job in a pastoralist society, really, we joked about it. Your role is only to drinking tea and chat with guests. No labor work is required for, heavy labor work left for men. Women are basically dealing with all the household work and production work. So they don't have spare time. If you talk about engaging women, they say they don't have time. So it's up to men, actually, I think, to share the household work, to relieve women. It's not, we actually found women are interested in other things. It's just they don't have time. So with a few examples, the key thing is to have a few good examples to show to others that things could work out. So women's behavior is mainly subject to men's behavior. That's my experience.
Yeah, thanks, Lucia. Baira, has your experience been similar? Or
yeah, it's interesting, and it might be also different culture to culture. And, I have been working with local communities, local women for many years to setting up these different conservation programs. As women conservationists working on a local level, it was more acceptable. I felt like we were more acceptable, probably more than men, because women to women, it's quite easy, to work and to find a time to talk about conservation, talk about the programs. And by the way, along the way, it's easy to understand to each other. But at the same time, while the local women household wife is participating in conservation program, getting engaged with conservationists, men tend to, pay attention. And as women conservationists, men wanted to help us, help them with vehicles and then help them with, field trips and things like that. So eventually they get involved into our programs. But I just thought that in a local level, as women conservationists, they're more acceptable. But I also had experience working with the higher level decision makers while working to make TOST as natures, to make the highest level of decision making. And then that was also completely different experience. I would say that it was as women conservationists, mostly in our team, mostly we are women. So while we're working with these high decision makers, we realized that we had to work like twice much as men. And somehow also at the higher level decision making, there are a few women here in Mongolia, for example. So you try to, if my voice wants to be heard, I try to reach out women first, which is very few sitting there. And so through those high decision making women, we try to reach the wider audience for that decision making. So those were two different experiences for me.
thanks, Baira, really interesting. What I would really like to also hear from Rashmi, from you as a young researcher, about the kind of, I think you've talked a little bit about the role of women and how conservation impacts them, but I'd really like you to share your, if not your own experiences or what you've seen around and your views on how this profession has treated, or if there are biases or what's been your experience? Or have you felt, I'm sure it's a mixed bag, but what have been the challenges as well as the opportunities that you have faced because of the gender? But before I come to you, I just wanted to make an announcement to all our participants today that if you have any thoughts or questions for any of the panelists, please start typing them in. Maybe you have been doing that already. But what I would also like you to do is to maybe share with us, type in as comments, what are the kind of most critical kind of change, let's say one or two most, what's the one most critical change you feel we need to make this field more supportive of women than it already is. So if you can, the field of conservation and from professional perspective, if you can start sharing some of your thoughts on the chat box, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, over to you, Rashmi. Sorry for the bit of a digression.
Yeah. So I will speak mostly from the experience, the field experience that I have had in the past 8 years, working with the pastoral communities. And I've had opportunity to do both, mostly social science surveys and ethnographic work, but also vegetation surveys for one of the chapters of my PhD. And I'll go one by one about the challenges and the opportunities that I've faced during the field work. So first thing, I think in the ethnographic work or the social work, I think women have more access to more respondents. So for example, in many of the communities, a lot of men and women don't speak with each other. For example, right now I'm speaking from Jaisalmer, which is a new setting for me. And I realize that it's not very easy for a man social scientist to access the women of the house. So that becomes the first most important, and I think it's fantastic that how we get access. Being a young scientist also, I think it's a benefit, because every time we go in the field, people in field treat us, like for me, it has happened that I've always been treated as an adopted daughter to some of the ex-herders. So they would always call me with Baini, or that's the term that they use for younger kids. So they would call me with that, and they feel like sharing all their stories of what happened to them or how they can help in the future conservation challenges. And it happens to both male and female, and how I can access the entire household. But I also feel one important thing is about personality, be it a man or a woman. A different kind of personality is involved in doing field work and become accessible to your respondents, as well as respondents becoming accessible to you. So it's more about cultivating relationships in the field while you are in field. And there's always a question of mistrust. So a lot of people will always look at you, because they don't understand what is a researcher, as face of the government, where they can tell all their worries and they feel that something will be delivered back to them. So with constant work between the respondents and yourself while you're in field for longer terms, I think that should be worked out to make them understand that we are here to document and then perhaps to inform the policymakers, but we really cannot make the direct change. So these are some of the things that I think, being a younger research scholar and doing work with the society, has been helpful and challenging. But I also feel that I have been fortunate to work in the Himalayas. And I feel in India, Himalaya is the safest place to work for any women. And I've had the most lovely team members, all men in both the geographies, and they have been very, very supportive. So that one thing that others might have felt at field, which is about security of a female researcher, has not happened to me. So I've been fortunate that way, but there are these challenges also. But in terms of ecological work, one thing that's it's like funny to me, that when I started my ecological field work, to reach one of my site, I have to walk for say 3 days to reach the field site. And the field members, the field buddies, thought that she won't be able to do that. But again, working for several months with them, then I gained that respect that she's one of us and she can actually work. So sometimes you also have these challenges that you have to prove yourself to your field assistants about your capacity to work in it. So I think it's a constant reputation building in some sense, where you're also a member of the family for some, but you're also equal man, women in some way. So these have been my experiences so far in field. I'm yet to look at the decision making after I join a position that deals with all these things. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Rashmi. I think from it's actually heartening to hear some of your experiences and views. I mean, I also am very keenly aware, and as most of our participants are, that this is there are all kinds of experiences, there are exceptions, and so on, and not to disregard them at all. And I know that even from my own experiences, and it's nobody's perfect, but I know that women are under much more pressure, like you said, to in some sense prove yourself, whether it is physically or your other abilities, the ability to negotiate field work and the ability to do science or whatever, much more pressure on women than there tends to be on men. So I think that is a reality. But yeah, I agree that many of us have been very privileged to be working in these kinds of landscapes, Himalayan, Tibetan Plateau landscapes, which are perhaps slightly, in some sense different from many other parts of South Asia. So we are about an hour, and I think we should be concluding soon. We've just not even been able to scratch the surface. This is a rather immensely important subject, but it's really thanks again, Justine, for helping us get started on it. I think that what I would like to do is to just maybe ask Lujer about, in terms of your role as a mentor, Lujer, both at the university, where there's just so many outstanding women students, PhD students you have mentored, and conservationists, but also your role as the vice president of the Committee for Science Advancement, or something like that.
Women in Science and Technology.
Science and technology. So what are the kind of, steps you think we should be undertaking, or that you try to, what are the kind of ideas you try to implement, particularly for the advancement of women in our field?
It's a systematic thing that needs to be changed. The reason why we have this society association on women in science and technology is because the higher you go, as Bayan just mentioned, the higher you go in any system, I think, is the higher level you go, fewer women are. In science field, especially so. So the association is to provide supportive environment and policy changes, promote policy changes to provide allowance for women to have equal opportunities, especially for young women like PhD students or young early career professionals to have recognize the need for them to take care of children, to give birth and rear children. So that should be considered as part of their social responsibility, and that's paid by the society. So like, for example, the policies that has been changed for women to apply for Young Scientists Award, women's the limit for women extended for 5 years to 45, age of 45. Things like that. So give them 5 years period to take care of family. But still, I think it's difficult. Women take more responsibility. Women take more responsibilities at home, and the men do not have to. And that's still a common understanding. So that is a cultural change that needs to take time. That will take time. But on the other hand, when the society provide favorable policies or even financial incentives, some universities like Tokyo University, they would provide fund. Actually, Japanese government would provide fund to the units, the institutions who hire young women as their employee, additional fund to provide to the institution for childcare, to build kindergartens and so on. So this kind of favorable policy helps, but the most important thing is that, you know, women themselves should feel the equality, should argue for equality. Inequality is everywhere. But if you allow inequality to happen, you give these, you know, give people who abuse you or providing an unequal situation for you an opportunity, which you are also responsible for. So that is important. Like Rashmi just mentioned, your own effort counts. And the confidence you show, people would respect. The efforts you make, people would respect. Respect is what gained, not given. So that is what I would always, you know, show my students or talk to them about it. If they do something, that I would on site to explain to them what different approach could be made. Of course, as Charu, you mentioned that women had to deal with additional situations like sexual harassment. Well, men can have that problem too, but women are more disadvantaged, it seems to be, especially in the traditional community, when men are, you know, nomadic community can be very relaxed about sexual behavior. When the young student go, you actually have worries about what will happen. So this kind of subtlety, you have to warn students. Again, if you don't like, you don't give opportunities. That's the bottom line. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still learning.
Thank you.
Actually.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we all are, Lucia. Thank you so much. I do have one question sent directly to me from Preeti Sharma. Preeti wants to know, local female conservation leader may go through or experience when working in his or her own community. I think implicit to Preeti's point is that, you know, that we've been mostly working with communities that we don't belong to. We've been, in some sense, we have been outsiders in the areas that we have been working in. But what to expect when you want to work in your own communities? So would anybody like to share their views on that?
Yeah, I think when one is working on one's own community, a lot of things you don't document because it's not new for you. And then perhaps you miss a lot of data there. And this is one thing that I've seen happening with a lot of people because they know a lot about it. So there's a big chance that you miss out on things. But I also understand that when it's your own community, the respondents may not take you seriously or they may laugh on what you're doing. So these, I think, would be some negative parts of working on your own community. On the other side, I think people can be supportive too because you are from their community and they may take pride, and you writing about them and being from the same community can actually help. So these are the two things of looking at while working with your own people.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Rashmi. Ranjini, do we have any other questions, do you think?
Yes, Charu, we have one for Rashmi in the chat from Ayashi Das. So she says, thank you so much for the informative session. My question goes out to Rashmi. In certain parts around the world, for grassland habitats owned by the government, NGOs, pastoralists are made to be stakeholders in the conservation and management of such habitats, essentially to prevent succession. Are there any provisions for a similar disposition in India? Rashmi, would you like to?
Yeah,
maybe-
I would actually like this person to speak, because I don't think I'm really clear on her question. Or Ranjani, if you can just
Yeah, so
conclude
maybe,
it for me.
Ayashi, could you ask this question? If you're, I think you're still here with us.
Yes, hi. Hi, this is Ayushi. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
hi Ayashi.
Okay. So my question is basically like in certain parts around the world, for lands owned by the government or NGOs, if specifically if they are grassland habitats, they collaborate with pastoralists and they make them stakeholders, and then the pastoralist can go during certain seasons and have their herds grazing in those areas, essentially to prevent succession, like for the grassland to becoming a forest in the long run. So I'm just wondering if any such arrangements are presently available in India.
Not right now that I'm aware of, but I think if it happens, it will be a good practice where not just some people, everyone, not everyone. Actually, there should be a question on equity and the number cap of these herders. But I do have a story from my own PhD research where when the evictions of the pastoralists were happening post the grazing ban was implemented in the area, some of the herders were actually called the Himal Rakshaks, which are the guardians of the mountains. They were given this title and they were allowed to take their animals inside the park. On the cost of what? On the cost of telling if the other herders are getting inside, and their job was to keep them outside. But I think it's problematic because it results in the long term, it results in a lot of social conflicts within the community, which shouldn't happen. If we want a good conservation plan, the first thing should be the community seen as one unit together, not like you give access to some people and not to others. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, that's quite understandable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aishi.
There's a
Thank-
couple more. Sorry.
Maybe, Ranjini, I think I have an eye on the time. Maybe we can squeeze in one more, and then the remaining ones perhaps could be forwarded directly to the panelists later.
Yeah. So
So
there's
one
no,
more question, please.
there are not questions, but there are a couple of interesting comments. I thought we could
Sure.
read them out.
Please, please, please. Yes.
So there's one from Kinsong Bhutia, who says, I'm Kinsong Bhutia from Sikkim. I would like to highlight the benefit of women in pastoral field has many advantages. Sustainable harvest of resources like medicinal plants, and they use timber. Men are active in hunting, and culture and religion also plays an important role in conservation. So he's highlighting that often, with gender roles, men and women, they can relate to nature in different ways, and women can have different relationships with nature. So that was his comment. We have another one from Kostu, when we're talking about what do we need to change to support women in conservation. Kaustubh says, we should perhaps stop assuming that being gender neutral is equivalent to being gender sensitive. It is not enough and seldom effective. We have another one from Sering Bhutia. For women, it is not easy to come across conservation work. Women have more responsibility, more hard work, more challenges physically and mentally. So these are just a few comments from the comment section.
Yeah, thank you, Ranjini. And thank you to those of you who shared your views. I really would need to conclude this session now. So, I mean, thank you so much, Lucia, Rashmi, and Baira, for your sharing your views and ideas. Like I said, we've just begun to scratch the surface, but but at least it's a beginning. So thanks, Justine and the Snow Leopard Network for starting us off. There's a lot to think about, at least for me, from these discussions, a lot to follow up on, and a lot of dilemmas too, like the ones you pointed to, Lucia. So with this, I would like to end this session. Thanks to all our participants. Thanks for your time and interest. And yeah, stay safe. And until next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Charu. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.